My fellow Americans, we shall not weep, but let us give thanks to President Trump for his 4 years of hard work and love for America. Let us not put our heads down. Let us rise and look to a better future. Let us praise God. Let us understand his plan is far greater. I know all are disappointed, but this violence is not who we are. We're love, respect, honor. The ones who destroyed will be accountable, but the ones who truly wanted to share love and respect will be heard. Let us put aside our differences and let America grow. Let us stand again with pride, and we as a nation will hold on to the love that President Trump shared with us all. It's not over. The truths of justice will prevail, for God's glory shall as well. Love to you.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance and JRA Nation. Thank you for joining us. So happy to be here with all of you today. Mitch and I will be sharing our thoughts today on impeachment, the 25th Amendment, the Capitol building riot, censorship of conservatives, and where we go from here. But first, around this time every year, the President of the United States gives a speech on the State of the Union. Well, my friends, the State of the Union is at one of its lowest points in our history, and division in our country is greater than at any time since the Civil War. Over the last 4 years, the left has tried to resist, threaten, investigate, accuse without evidence or cause, demean, and stop President Trump in any way possible. In spite of that, I believe that most fair-minded historians will ultimately conclude that President Trump was one of the most accomplished presidents in American history. He's not perfect. He's made his share of mistakes and errors in judgment, but without question, it is the left and the Democrats who are now trampling on our Constitution, advocating the removal of protected free speech, threatening and attempting to prevent conservatives from exercising their right to operate a business or have a job, shutting down email access, shutting down social media access and most lines of communication. They're even creating lists of Trump supporters with the intent of hurting them. Mostly leaders on the left chose to almost completely shut down the economy and then blamed President Trump for high unemployment and failing businesses. The left has ignored and prevented many requests for an audit of our presidential election results, which has fueled anger and created distrust in our ability to have free and fair elections. Today, I am calling for an independent commission to be established to fairly review the evidence of those people who have submitted affidavits and testified about fraud in our election and other evidence that could have affected the outcome of the election. If an impartial commission finds that fraud is isolated and insignificant, then I will push for election reforms and accept the results of the election. But if claims of massive fraud are revealed, then it will give a clear mandate to Congress to reform our election process. Either way, the American people have a right to know, and I would think that both sides of the aisle would support that. And now they've used impeachment again as a special weapon, and sadly, this will now open the door to future Congresses to do the same. I want to be clear. The Jewish Republican Alliance strongly condemns and is angered by those who chose to illegally enter the Capitol building during the Save America rally in Washington, D.C. This type of behavior cannot be tolerated by our society, and those who illegally entered the Capitol building, rioted, and damaged property should be prosecuted, and if convicted, be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Those people do not represent the JRA. They chose to exercise their right to protest, their right of free speech. That's what the majority of them did. The people who entered the building were illegally committing crimes, and we do not support that. And the riotous behavior serves to undermine the rule of law and the important achievements during President Trump's term. However, unlike many people on the left who made excuses for those who rioted, looted, and committed acts of violence this past summer in response to the George Floyd death, the JRA equally condemns those who committed those crimes and condemns those who wish to cover up for them, make excuses for their behavior, and provide money for their bail. The JRA will continue to strongly support the rule of law and our Constitution. My friends, we can no longer be silent. We must speak out, and we will. Now more than ever, conservative voices of reason must be heard. And with your help, all the important issues and values that JRA have been fighting for the last 5 years will continue on. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to introduce to you now fellow co-founder Mitch Silberman. Mitch?
Hello, JRA community. It is always great when we are together, especially now. Shock, denial, bargaining, guilt, anger, depression, and finally acceptance and hope. You may recognize those as the 7 stages of grieving. Hat tip to my long-term dear friend, Mark Woodhour, who's producing today. We got together last week and he said, you know what, in many ways, my wife and I feel like we're going through the 7 stages of grief. And there's no doubt this is a very, very challenging time for all of us. Things did not go the way we wanted to, and it's very difficult. But there's plenty of reasons to have for hope and optimism. I'm going to share some of that with you. Some of you know that I own a wealth management firm. When I opened it 27 years ago, I was dealing with young people. And I would tell them, as we help you plan for and achieve your financial success, the best thing you can do for the poor is not be one of them, right? I mean, think about it. How many jobs do poor people create? How many endowments are they able to give? So the best thing you can do for the poor is not be one of them. And as it relates to today, the best thing you can do for those that are defeated and distraught is not be one of them. I cannot stress this enough. It is so crucial. So remember in the old days, we would fly in these contraptions called an airplane. We would huddle together and sit with other people. And if you recall, the flight attendant would get up front and talk about the safety precautions, and you would drop everything to focus on every word he or she had to say, right? Anyway, but I bet you recall, they said if there was a sudden change in cabinet pressure, the face mask would pop down, right? And what do they tell you to do first if you had a child traveling with you? That's right, put it on yourself first. You're of no use to that child if you're passed out. So right now, so many people on our side are very distraught, very upset, and the biggest gift you can give them is to not be one of them. Listen, 74 million plus people like us voted for President Trump. And I say plus because I think, like Bruce, I know he won. But like they said in the Kennedy-Nixon election, hey, they cheated fair and square. So 74 million plus people voted for him. We are not going anywhere. God willing, President Trump isn't going to go anywhere either. I don't know what's next for him, but I'm eager to find out. Of those 74 million plus that voted for President Trump, what percent are going to vote Democrat next time? Especially when you see how, as always, Democrats are going to overplay their hands. I believe deeply in American exceptionalism, our Constitution, our founding principles, our Bill of Rights, our amendments. Liberty is in our DNA, and I have a lot of faith in that. And I'll tell you one other thing that's very, very important. One of the true blessings Bruce and I have had with the JRA is we meet fellow patriotic conservatives all over the country. There are JRA groups forming all over the country like never before. A few months ago, Bruce and I had a truly dynamic Zoom meeting with a group forming in the Santa Barbara area. And it was very energetic and it was very, emboldening, and we felt great. And one lady said, you know what, Mitch, I love what you and Bruce are doing, but I just need a little bit more clarity on what exactly the JRA does. And I said, well, the JRA exists to unite and energize conservatives to take positive action on behalf of America and Israel. She goes, okay. And I said, since our very beginning, our 3 founding pillars have been fellowship, education, and networking. We put on big events, we get together. I could see she needed a little bit more clarity. And I said, all right, let me give you one example that I think will resonate. if you know anyone who's ever been a drug addict or an alcoholic and they got their life back in order, if you ask them, how did you do it? Let's pretend for a moment you never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. You never heard of it. And they said, oh yeah, I got my act together through AA. And you said, what's that? And they said, well, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. And you said, well, what do you do there? Well, we meet regularly. And, well, we share stories, we support each other. And, well, we all know AA has changed lives. AA has saved lives. And right now, in many capacities, the JRA is a form of AA. You are not alone. You are not crazy. We deeply love this country and Israel. And there's so much that we can do. There's so much we must do. You have to stay informed. You got to get involved. You can make a difference, because now more than ever, your conservative activism is needed to preserve the Judeo-Christian values upon which our beloved country was founded. We do have a bright future ahead. Right now, things look difficult, but I am so confident in our future. Thank you. Bruce?
Mitch, that was so very well said. Thank you so much. That was great. We have so much to talk about today, like we always do. So let's get started, right? So, I'm looking now, I said in my speech, and I've been saying it for the last 4 or 5 years, they've tried every possible way of getting President Trump out of office, made up stuff, did whatever they could, legal and not legal. And now they come up with this other scheme, which they tried before, the 25th Amendment. Like, to me, the 25th Amendment, this is how I see it. This was designed for a president who was incapacitated, someone who was shot, who had a stroke, who had some serious illness, who had to have major surgery and had to go under anesthesia. It was not meant as a political tool. And I think that Vice President Trump rightly said, I'm not doing it. What are your thoughts?
You mean Vice President Pence?
Well, that was a slip of the tongue, right?
That's kind of right.
President Pence.
This is a very challenging time for all of us. We're in uncharted territory. On this call, Pence was correct. President Trump is nowhere near incapacitated physically or mentally. This is yet another tool that the left is using. They not only want to drive President Trump from office, they not only want to humiliate him and destroy him and his business, but they want to send a message. Any of you out there that are thinking of trying to disrupt the apple cart, don't even think of it. This is what we're going to do to you. So they're not honorable, and it's a despicable thing what they've done, Bruce.
What I'm concerned about with when they use tools like this is they're thinking very short term. And when you undermine the Constitution, which is the fabric of our society and our government, then you open the door for other people in the future to do the same thing. And it's not good for our country.
No, and it's already happened with the so-called Harry Reid rule. When he was in charge of the Senate, he thought it was so fantastic that he would change the rules to benefit them. And ironically, it bit them in the rear end with approving judges. So you're right, it is very short-sighted. They are obsessed with power. Dennis Prager talked about that for the people on the left, at least my term is their drug of choice is power. They don't, when you're that obsessed with power or hatred, you don't think about long-term things, Bruce. You just want what you want now, and you're going to exact revenge. And what we're seeing is a very dangerous precedent. In fact, there's some brand new incoming congresswoman who said day one she wants to impeach Biden. On one hand, you can applaud it. On the other hand, it's like, that's not good for our country. You did it, we did it. Now you did it, well, we did it.
And then who do you get if you impeach Biden? You wind up getting Kamala Harris, right?
Well, Bruce, if you recall, the week that he announced her as his running mate, I said, Biden, you better get a food taster. That woman, in my opinion, is lusting for power. So I have no idea what to predict for this administration.
We're all concerned. The big elephant in the room now that happened this week is now they've decided to impeach the president again. Nancy Pelosi has strong-armed her folks and they got 10 other Republicans to join along. I want to read you something that Alan Dershowitz said on impeachment this time around. He defended, rightly so, the president back in January and February, but now he wrote this: it's unconstitutional. I mean, you cannot impeach a president unless he's committed high crimes and misdemeanors. And these don't constitute high crimes and misdemeanors. constitutionally protected speech. You can condemn, you can attack, you can refuse to vote for, you can do all of those things which are politically available to you. But the one thing you can't do is use the law, which is impeachment, or something which is protected by the First Amendment. And I think that pretty much sums up my position, although I don't think President Trump did anything wrong on that day, but I don't think this is even an impeachable offense.
Well, the first thing he did was not impeachable either. You know, the irony is just rich. They impeach him for an improper phone call to Ukraine, but the guy that they elected really did a lot of improper things with Ukraine. So this is just another tool. You know, they've ruined the Constitution. They now ruining the 25th Amendment. They're ruining impeachment. They don't care. They are literally obsessed with destroying President Trump. And I'll tell you what was very eye-opening to me, Bruce. This last, a few weeks ago, when they were putting forth the last stimulus package, it was something like $1.2 trillion, sorry, and about 300 million was going to Americans, $600. And I said, it hit me like a brick. So 900 billion of the 1.2 trillion is going to foreign countries. And what President Trump is doing is he's upsetting the apple cart. He's interrupting their gravy train. The way that they're used to doing business, the way they enrich themselves. I mean, I've joked, wouldn't it be great to make 100 grand a year and be worth 20 million, like a lot of our Congress people are? How did that happen? How did that happen for Biden? So I think that the vengeance and the fury at President Trump daring to interrupt what's they have going on, they don't care. That he's got to be destroyed. And as I said before, also send a message to any future Trumps out there.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Mitch. You know, one of the things that has separated the Trump movement and all the great rallies that he's had is there really hasn't been very many problems at all. There's a few people that try to infiltrate them from Antifa outside, but you know, there really hasn't been, considering the amount of people that were gathered, and I saw it firsthand in Beverly Hills, and I think you went to that too, is that all these, you know, thousands of people are there and not one problem. They clean up after themselves. But at the same time, you know, you have a large group of hundreds of thousands of people at the Capitol building. You cannot blame President Trump for something that he never advocated. In fact, his speech clearly said, let's go to the Capitol and peacefully let our voices be heard. And the last time I checked, that was part of the Constitution, that we had a right to do that. And then I watched the news yesterday, and all of a sudden, all the big cities are suddenly bringing in National Guard troops, and they're suddenly bringing in all kinds of protection and defenses, when all summer long they turn their backs on the riots. And that to me is the ultimate in hypocrisy.
It's been very troubling, the $2 billion worth of damage, the 30 deaths that went on for weeks and months at a time, and the left was either silent or cheering it on. And then you have, by some counts, 1 million people that descended upon the Capitol. And based on our good friend Barack Lurie's show last Sunday, he said about 30 people, 30 of that million entered the Capitol building, 30 out of 1 million. So when someone says the majority, the majority doesn't even cover it. I mean, what's statistically 20 or 30 out of 1 million? I mean, it doesn't even register. And so you have people that are clutching their pearls, have never seen anything so awful in their lives, but were eerily silent or justified the horrors that went on over the summer. It's maddening. It truly is, Bruce.
It is. And, you know, one of the things that I would like to pride most conservatives and compliment them on is that we're taking the same stand now as we took in the summer.
Yeah.
When there's violence, when there's rioting, when people are being hurt or threatened or murdered, or people are breaking into the Capitol building, then we speak out. And JRA put out a really strong statement that you and I put together, Mitch, that condemned that. But we also condemned, which I read today, we condemned what happened during the summer. And I think we need to I'm very disappointed in some of the leadership in the Republican Party, I must say, who now know that President Trump is losing power and have no use for him anymore, like Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, it's Ronald Reagan woke us up to the evils of big government, and in many ways, President Trump has woken us up to the evils of the swamp. And the swamp includes both the Republican and Democratic Party, and sadly, the upper echelon of Department of Justice and FBI and CIA. It pains me when people say there's been no evidence of fraud, there's no evidence of corruption, there's no evidence of the deep state. Like, what do you mean there's no evidence? I mean, we are overflowing at evidence of the deep state, of the fraud. And, we have been consistent, Bruce. You wrote a beautifully worded piece about condemning the violence. We condemn the violence over the summer. We condemn the violence, regardless of who did it. But the people on the left, it's tremendous double standard, and they get outraged. And in fact, I have an uncle that is a devout liberal Jew. Okay, we love each other. We don't talk too often. And last Wednesday, and we really don't communicate that often. He knows I'm a staunch conservative, and I know he's a pretty good leftist. But we still love each other. We're family. Out of nowhere, he texted me last Wednesday, and he says, "I can't believe you approve what's going on in the Capitol." And he started, giving me a hard time via text, and I took the high road. And I said, "Who said I approve it?" But it's just this assumption. It's just unbelievable.
Exactly. I mean, maybe because they approved it, and there were people murdered on the street. If you go into our big cities now, and I've been to a few, mostly if you go to Los Angeles, it's terrible. There's trash all over the place, homelessness, drugs, disease. Things are boarded up, and everybody was okay with that for so long. I just don't understand how that could be.
Bruce, which party runs those cities? I'm not clear. Which party is in charge of those cities?
I think you hit it right on that.
But the problem is, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers have the same challenge, we have people in our lives that are good, honest, hardworking, decent, charitable people. They are wonderful people, and they could not wait to vote for Biden. And it's so troubling to me because they could say, "Well, I can't believe you voted for Trump." And I would say, "You mean the guy that moved the embassy, that was the best friend Israel or Jews ever had? You mean the guy that signed 5 peace agreements in the Middle East? You mean the guy that, before the pandemic, record stock market high, record low unemployment for Blacks and Hispanics?" The list goes on and on and on. And I don't know what to do about these people that are truly wonderful people, but they're so blinded by hatred or emotion that they can't think rationally in this capacity.
Well, one of the things the Torah, the Old Testament teaches us is we're judged by what we do in anger. When everybody's happy and feeling good, obviously it's easier to do good. But you have to judge people by what they do in anger as well. And we're not excused from having bad behavior just because we're angry at something. And I think that's really important to remember.
Well, there's an old saying that I think it was from a sports coach. It may have been Vince Lombardi, I don't know, but he says, the way a person wins shows much of their character. The way a person loses shows all of it. And the scary part about that, Bruce, is right now the Democrats won everything. I mean, not fair and square. I will go to my grave knowing that President Trump won this election and he was robbed by every way conceivable. But they've got the presidency, which is painful to say. They've got the Congress, the House of Representatives, and of course they're going to have the Senate because the tiebreaker is Kamala Harris. And they're even getting more vicious and angry even after winning. So they're never satisfied. I don't think that their cravings can ever be satisfied for power and retribution.
So what you're saying is true, Mitch. I think you make a great point. What is concerning a lot of conservatives right now, and I hear that from some of the conservative leaders throughout the country who have let me know, that there not only was President Trump shut down in Twitter and Facebook, his email shut down, but it's happening to other conservatives. And we cannot let that happen. We cannot tolerate that. I really believe that cooler heads and stronger heads will prevent that, but we're at a crossroads right now. Which way is our country going to go? Is it going to go as the way of fascism? Is it going to go of the way of tyranny? Or are we going to allow free speech? even if it's speech that you do not like. The answer to speech you don't like is more free speech. Now, I'm not advocating that people can go on and try to drum people up to do illegal acts, because there are limitations. But I think it's a scary time when conservative leaders have now been shut down and everybody's turning a blind eye to that.
Yeah, Bruce, we are in uncharted territories. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to go to a great one to your last point from Ellie T. She said, how can we protect ourselves from losing our jobs, clients, and livelihood for being conservatives? And this is what you're talking about. You know, I have to tell you, we are free because of brave soldiers that put their lives on the line for our freedom. Is it scary right now? It's really scary. Every day there's more and more examples of people losing their jobs or their livelihood or bank accounts, you name it, because they're conservative. But to Ellie's question, I think we have to stand up and be counted. We don't want to be obnoxious. We don't want to be rude. But, you know, if it comes down to it, I think we have to stand up for ourselves, for our rights, and for our country. And, you know, I have a business. I don't, unless I know my fellow clients are conservative like I am, I wouldn't bring it up. But if they said, I need to know if you're conservative, otherwise I don't want to work with you anymore, I would engage in that conversation very politely, very strongly, but very professionally, and just say, how does that reflect between the two of us that you're willing to sever our relationship? Like, how have I treated you? How have I done to you? And you got to kind of put the onus back on them that they are out of line for wanting to harm you for being a conservative. It's just another form of discrimination. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce?
I do. And, you know, our friend Larry Greenfield posted a picture with him with a honorable veteran who actually who has fought to protect the values and the safety of our country. And one of my comments is, when he said that was a hero, and I agree, I said to him that it's our duty now to maintain that our country keeps the values that he fought so hard to protect. Otherwise, we're letting down these veterans who fought in wars that separated us from what happened in Germany, what happened in Japan during the Second World War, what happened when Reagan's great fought to bring down communism. It's our job to make sure we don't turn into a country like that. And the only way we can do that is to be able to continue to speak out.
We have to speak out. And, you know, we have people that risk their lives, and we have to be willing to risk being honest and open. There's another really important question from Michael N., who writes, the claims of voter fraud and the feud of Trump with Georgia Republican officials essentially handed the Senate to the Democrats. Both races were winnable. Don't you think Trump's personal behavior hurt the Republicans in the long term? I think it's a fair question, and I'll answer it this way, Michael. President Trump, like all of us, is a mixed bag, okay? One of my personal heroes is Martin Luther King. We all know without a doubt that he was a womanizer. Therefore what? Therefore what he did wasn't great. We also know that Harry Truman said very harsh things about Jews privately, yet without him, Israel isn't recognized. Do we sometimes wish President Trump didn't tweet this and didn't say that? Of course. But you know what? On the whole, the man loves America, loves Israel, fought like never before, and we have to accept him, warts and all. Did he personally cost us the Senate? No. Could he have handled it better? Yes. But I'll tell you what, I have a whole new hero in this guy who unabashedly loved America and fought and wouldn't back down. And his actions, as they say, actions are louder than words. His actions were off the chart. But it's a fair question.
You know, there's a lot of parallels in history, but they're going on right now. Do you know, I read this from the World News Daily article on January 12th, that a senior counsel for the taxpayer-funded PBS service disclosed in a hidden camera interview that he wants re-education camps for children of Republican. And if he said out in this interview that he didn't know he's being recorded, but he said if Biden would have lost the election, he advocated going to the White House and throwing Molotov cocktails. He also said that he was so happy that he was thinking that more COVID-19 was coming to red states Because if conservatives were sick or dying, they would be less likely to cast their ballots.
Taxpayer money well spent, huh?
Well, how does he keep his job after that?
I don't know if he did. I don't recall, but there are so many heroes on our side that are taking chances. This guy James O'Keefe goes undercover. He and his team, and they videotape. They just videotaped the guy in charge of Twitter saying that, of course, we're going to target Trump, but it's not just Trump. It's going to be bigger than that. So there are people in the past that have taken huge risks. There are people now that are taking huge risks. It's incumbent upon us. Okay, you may not. We're not going to lay down our lives necessarily or forfeit our careers, but you got to at least stand your ground. You got to at least say, you've known me for a long time. Am I a bad person? If it comes out you're a conservative, I'm not going to shy away from it.
And ultimately, Mitch, I think we're all having to realize that it comes down to knowing that we have free and fair elections. If people, I called on this commission to someone to form a commission to investigate this, because it's obvious there's a difference of opinion here. There's one side that says either there's no fraud or there's very insignificant fraud. And there are others who have heard testimony for so many people who have said, I've heard backdating at the post office. I've heard illegal ballots being cast. Why can't we as a nation get to the bottom of that? But either way, there are ways of reforming our election process that will stop this from ever happening again. Signature verification, cleaning up their voter rolls, stopping unsolicited ballots from being mailed to people, insisting on in-person voting. There are verification software out there that can verify your identity with your cell phone on the spot. There's a company, ID.me, that will verify who you are right away and upload it. So if we have in-person voting, that's one way of being able to certify that people are who they say they are.
Bruce, sadly, the things you're calling for make so much sense, but they don't want it. The ruling class does not want it. They want voter fraud so they can keep it going. It's astonishing that they have the chutzpah to say asking for an ID is racist. And I'm sure we've all seen the meme where it shows a long list of things you're required to show an ID. It's not racist. And the one thing that you have to show an ID for is racist is voting. They're not cleaning it because they don't want to clean it up. Okay, Charlie Kirk, a repetitive JRA speaker, has posted so many times that there's like 140% voter roll in certain major cities. They want this to keep going. So when this, when I talked earlier about the 7 stages of grief, at first we were all in shock and denial. And then some people moved on and said, well, for next time we need to clean things up. Well, at that point, I wasn't ready for next time. I wanted it now. Unfortunately, we are where we are. And part of being a leader is telling the truth. And, unless some incredible miracle happens, Beijing Biden is going to be inaugurated next week. And it's so painful to acknowledge that, but that's where we are. So we didn't get it done for this time, but we do have to have fair and free elections. It's crucial, it's critical, and maybe that's the next big project.
But until they deal with the elephant in the room, where you have millions of people who feel that their vote either didn't count or that the votes that were cast were not representative of the country, until you get down to solving that, people are going to feel like this is not fair. We're not truly free. Because the idea used to be, all right, if you don't like them, and that's next election, you vote them out. That's our right as a citizen. But if you can no longer do that, then what are we left to do?
Well, that's a tough one. I'm going to go back to another really important question from Stephanie S. I know who that is. Some very reputable news sources have come out that one of the founders of Antifa, John Sullivan, has been charged with breaching the U.S. Capitol. He has been arrested by the FBI. Even CNN reporter commented on it. And of course, the mainstream media isn't reporting it. The reason they're not, because the narrative is more important than truth. They want to blame President Trump. They want to blame us. One of the guys on CNN said that if you voted for President Trump, you're siding with the Klan and you're siding with, I forgot what other terrorist group he mentioned. They don't want the truth. They want us defeated, shut up, silenced, and gone. And that's the sad truth of it.
Yeah, I read that exact same article today. And you know what's sad is there's such misinformation out there and things that flow through all of our inboxes about things that were supposed to happen and things that were going to happen or that did happen that just weren't true. And so I stepped back and said, wow, is this true? I had to actually question it to see whether it was true or not. And it seemed very legitimate to me. And so far they've seen that there were people who were there from groups that probably shouldn't have been there. But nonetheless, probably there could have been angry people that followed along with them, that, you know, that heard them chant things like "this is our house" and run into the Capitol building. But that was wrong. It shouldn't have been done. The only criticism, one of the few criticisms I have of President Trump, is when he publicly criticized Vice President Pence for not taking the constitutional position to try to send this back to the states. I think he had his right. There were arguments on both sides. I just wouldn't have done it publicly. What's your thoughts on that, Mitch?
That's a tough one, Bruce. I am no constitutional scholar, so I, from what I heard leading up to that moment, Vice President Pence had the option of creating a 10-day commission or sending it back to the states. Again, I am not a constitutional scholar, but I felt in some ways, maybe I don't have all the facts right, but in some ways I think the VP Pence let us down, let President Trump down. I just think the fraud was so enormous and so huge. And for people even on our side to say there's no evidence, it's like, what about the dumps? What about the putting up the barriers so you can't see? What about all the votes that just happened in the middle of the night only for Biden? What about people being pushed away? I mean, the list, if you're on this broadcast, you know that the evidence was overwhelming. And someone asked, well, why didn't it go to court? I don't know. It could have been didn't have standing, couldn't be the court. Maybe SCOTUS didn't have the courage or the moral backbone to do. I don't know, but this was a travesty.
Oh, it was. One of the things President Trump said was, you know, he was very disappointed that so many dead people voted, but he was even more disappointed that so many dead people requested ballots.
His sense of humor is second to none. Yeah, and then someone else posted, you know, it's a funny thing that I'm so upset that my grandpa voted Democrat. He never would have done that when he was alive, you know? I mean, there's all kinds of things like this, but
people on the left, when you tell that joke, they get upset over that one.
Well, and how come only dead people vote Democrat? You know, and how come all these dumps in the middle of the night, they never find, you know, this woke me up. I forgot what year it was. It may have been 2012 when Al Franken ran against Norm Coleman in Minnesota, and it was neck and neck, and literally in the middle of the night, they found 300 unopened ballots in the trunk of a car, and they were all for Norm Coleman. I'm sorry, Al Franken. And Norm Coleman, who's a good, decent person, said, you know, well, I guess, what are you going to do? And that one seat allowed Obamacare to be passed.
No, it's very sad. The other thing that's kind of haunting us right now still is what's going on with this COVID-19 epidemic that we're having. Almost everybody we know knows somebody or whatever that has gotten it. And thank God it's not an Ebola where the vast majority of people are surviving this, but we are losing people. But what I find very ironic is before the election, all the Democrats, including our current to-be president and vice president, I don't trust the vaccine. It's not that I don't trust science. I don't trust President Trump. Like he made it in his garage, right? The day after the election is over, all of a sudden, the vaccine is now ready to go. It's now approved. And Biden and Harris are rolling up their sleeves on camera, showing that they're taking the vaccine. And they're all in favor. And everybody's, you know, it's like they're going to a tattoo parlor, ready to get tattooed. And they're proud of it. And all of a sudden now he's saying in the next 100 days, we're going to have our people vaccinated where was he all this time? I didn't see any help from him in all the time leading up to this. And President Trump mobilized private industry like no one ever had before. These people are saying that they didn't think most cases they can get these vaccines for 10 years, and none of them have ever got it faster than 5 years. So now Biden is going to come into office, roll up his sleeves, and he's going to get rid of COVID-19 for us.
Yeah, it's pure partisan politics on full display. It's so patently obvious. And you're right, Bruce. When the soon-to-be VP said, "I wouldn't trust President Trump. I wouldn't get that vaccine," and then she went and got it. One of the things that also bothers me about this is the people on the left in power lie all the time with such ease, and their lies have devastating consequences. And then they say, "Oh, well, President Trump is such a liar." And I've asked so many times, name me one lie that President Trump has said that has cost lives or ruined industries or ruined businesses. They just can't stand him. And so anything he's done must be bad. And now that he's going to be out of the picture, let's open up the cities, let's open up the states, let's take the vaccine. I mean, it's truly despicable. I love watching National Geographic. I've watched it for years. I love it, love it, love it. So Bruce, when you see a lion eating a deer, okay, does the lion feel bad for the deer? No, it's just food. It doesn't feel bad at all. When you bite into an apple, do you feel bad for the apple? No. The way that so many of the left in power view the American people, they're the deer, they're the apple. They don't care how many lives are destroyed. They don't care about the lies. They don't care about the devastation because they're blinded with hatred for President Trump and with their lust for power.
Well, also with Nancy Pelosi, when, during this whole lockdown, when people were trying to get money and they wanted a second release of funds to the American people, she was busy home eating her ice cream and saying that she was okay with just letting it pass, that it was a political decision just to let it pass. And so businesses have struggled. This is going to have a long-term effect on our country. I hope not, but it seems to have been. And now, as soon as the election is over, she's racing to the microphone to get the $2,000 payments that President Trump advocated for. It's hypocrisy in its fullest, and it keeps going on. One of the concerns I'm hearing from a lot of the people who have asked questions, Mitch, is they're concerned about Joe Biden when he takes office and how he's going to treat Jews and Israel.
Well, our friends on the left, and I mean literally our friends who vote Democrat, think he'll be fine. I think just the opposite. I think that already from what I've seen, the appointees he's making have been openly hostile to Israel. I think the Joe Biden of 47 years ago is not the Joe Biden of today, and I'm not talking about just his mental capacity. I think he's an empty vessel, and right now he's being filled up with leftist dogma. And if you're on the left, you cannot be friendly to Israel. If you're a liberal, absolutely you can be friendly to Israel. So I think that it's already sadly being shown by his appointees. I think that we're in for our Jewish friends that voted Democrat who truly do love and care about Israel. I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening. And ironically, I hate to say it, but it might wake them up to say, wow, the Republican Party really is the pro-Israel party.
Well, I think they're in a very deep sleep. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to be woken up. Biden at his convention had Linda Sarsour speak at his convention. And then he took some heat for it, right? Because she is mixed up with a lot of anti-Semites, believe me, Farrakhan and others. And then he took some heat and publicly distanced himself from Linda Sarsour. But I spoke about that in one of our shows. Behind the scenes, his aides then met with Arab leaders and Palestinian leaders and supporters of her and apologized for distancing themselves with Linda Sarsour. So President Trump has decided and has been successful because he tried to get the Palestinians to come to the table. They refused, and he said, all right, I'm going around you, and started having peace deals with all of Israel's neighbors. And now this new bill that comes out, they're already giving money back to the Palestinians. I think the writing's on the wall here, Mitch.
Yeah, I mean, and what does it tell you when Iran is excited, China is excited that Biden is coming in? I mean, it's just terrible. I'm going to go back to really another important question from our audience, Brandon L. What's next for the Republican Party after the devastating losses in Georgia? Let me just give you a little insight what happened. Several years ago, I was part of an underground group of Hollywood conservatives, and I got to meet the then Georgia governor. Nathan Deal was his name. And he spoke to this Hollywood group that I was there, and he talked about all the tax breaks they were giving Hollywood to come film in Atlanta. And so what's happened over the last 8 to 10 years is Hollywood has been moving more and more to Georgia to produce. Well, what they're doing is they're importing liberals, and that is affecting the voting patterns. And that's a real big pet peeve of mine, is that liberals go to a state, they vote a certain way, they ruin it, and then like locusts, they go to another state and vote the same way and ruin that state again. So that's what happened in Georgia. I hope the people in Georgia do wake up and realize, hey, this is not who we are. And I think there's quite a few Senate seats up in 2 years. And of course, there's the House of Representatives in 2 years. So I think Georgia's going to come back.
I hope you're right. Again, Dennis Prager always talks about the two parties, and he says something to the effect that the Republicans are the stupid party and the Democrats are the dangerous party. So he chooses the stupid party rather than the dangerous party. So think of how stupid this was. Right before an election, President Trump comes out and says, hey, this $600 you're giving Americans is not enough. I want $2,000 for every American. Almost everybody's behind it. And McConnell puts the brakes on it. For whatever reason, I have not been able to figure out how many votes did that affect in Georgia when people are thinking, well, I'm voting for the party that's going to give me the $2,000. Now, listen, I'm not saying we should just buy votes by promising dollars, but in this case, that was a very stupid political move. Do you agree?
Yeah, I've heard people say the same thing, Bruce, that the prospect of 2,000 versus 600 helps sway the vote.
Because it was close, Mitch. It wasn't. It was that far.
Well, listen, Stacey Abrams bragged about the million votes she had lined up or whatever it was, and then you can't make this stuff up. Her sister was the judge that said, no, we're not going to clean up the voter rolls right before the election.
That was fair.
It's mind-boggling. There's a certain segment of our population, Bruce, that are going to always vote for Santa Claus, and it's very hard to compete with Santa Claus. They want the free stuff.
Good.
My bigger issue are the people that are good, decent people that are contributors to society that continually vote left. And that's very troubling to me. I see another great question from Zena G about our party uniting. That's a tough one. I try to think of things from scripture, like it's always darkest before the dawn, right? Or earlier in my speech, I talked about AA, and from what I understand, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can get better. I don't know, maybe our party was so unbelievably energized. Conservatives were so energized by President Trump's leadership, his conservatism. The swamp, the Republican, the establishment didn't like it. We saw how they had no backbone or courage when it came to it. So perhaps our party has to hit rock bottom, and I don't know who's going to be the next person to emerge or the new leaders, but I will tell you, it's going to be a group effort. You on this broadcast, if you're listening, there's ways you can get involved, make a difference. We can't wait for that one person. We have to all do our part.
Well, that's true. And one of the things that the left is doing, there's a show that you actually recommended to us called The Man in the High Castle. Yeah. And it was about what would have happened if Germany and Japan would have won the war. And it's a great show. I think it's on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the things that they did is have a year zero. Sound familiar? Where they started erasing everything that happened before. So now they're going back and going to Home Alone videos and editing out President Trump like he never had a cameo appearance there. The Democrats are already talking about, well, his legacy has been destroyed. This Capitol riot is just, people are never going to look the same. I mean, they're trying to erase 4 years of overwhelming success with a problem that happened in the Capitol building, and now erase Republicans, re-educate them. It sounds very familiar to me, like a country that we never were before.
Well, as I think Mark Twain said, history may not repeat itself, but it sure rhymes. Whenever the left gets into power, this is what they do. Dennis Prager this week spoke about the Reichstag, that in 1933 or whatever year it was, that, we're seeing the same pattern, that you need to be re-educated, you need to be silenced, you need to know your place, we're going to change the past. It is, if you're on this broadcast, it's probably very obvious to you as well. So it is a very scary time. This is why it literally, I'll tell you, the little things I've learned in life, Bruce, little things make a big difference. There's a local gym I go to in Thousand Oaks. It's open. I go there 5 days a week, and I see young people there in their 20s and 30s, and I doubt they're very political, but every so often I'll hear them say something. Like, we'll just kind of chat at the gym, and one guy said to me, "Hey, we the people." And I was like, that was just very inspiring. I had another young guy who was an employee there, and he said, "I'm not going to let some governor tell me who I can have at my house for Christmas or Thanksgiving." So what I'm saying is, it's in our DNA. We were literally bred on freedom, okay? And it's part of who we are. It's what we were taught in school back in the good old days when school taught us things like this. So I do have faith in the future, but we're in for some tough times right now, I think.
You brought up Dennis Prager. I think he spoke it on the radio, but he also wrote a column on January 11th, comparing the fire at the Reichstag in 1933, where the Nazis used this to blame this on the communists. And then also in his article, he talks about that they use this as an excuse to pass an act called the Enabling Act, which gave the Nazi Chancellor Adolf Hitler the power to pass laws by decree without any other approval. And what is happening now is they're trying to use this Capitol riot as an excuse to silence conservatives, to shut them out, to erase their history. And there's a great parallel. So I recommend this article that you brought up. It's really great.
Yeah, Dennis Prager puts out a column every Tuesday, and they're all fantastic. I want to bring up a point here from a good friend of ours, Tom S. He said he was in D.C. He was there when the assault was, and he says it was pre-planned and it was done to discredit support for President Trump. Listen, sadly, if this was a perfect storm of President Trump not officially winning. You had COVID, you had, as Bruce called it, cheat by mail. Then the left could not have asked for anything better than have a handful of ruffians going there and disrupting things. I mean, and it pains me to hear it's an insurrection. How many people take selfies during an insurrection? Were they armed? I heard of no guns. So this was not an insurrection. Was it wrong for the millionth time? Yes, it was wrong. We all know it was wrong. But an insurrection takes place with weapons, and you don't do selfies. So I think that this was a perfect storm. That the left maybe did plant some people there. And even if they didn't, they probably, if they even pray, said, "Thank you, God. I can't believe that you just made this happen on January 6th to help us further humiliate and destroy President Trump and his legacy."
I agree with you, Mitch. We have so many great questions here. Let's see. Lee Alpert. Whoop, shouldn't have given the last name, but so we know what is wrong. What specifically do we do now to take back our country?
Well, I'm going to tell you the secret right now. No, there's no magical formula, Lee. Obviously, this is a huge group effort. I don't know if any of you are Star Wars fans, but we all know the big stories, right? We all know, Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. Everyone knows, the whole planet knows those stories. About 3 or 4 years ago, they put out another Star Wars film, and forgive me, I don't remember the name, but it was like a parallel story. So the thing that I found so interesting as it relates to your question, Lee, was that we know the big story of how the Empire was defeated, at least in some of the movies, right? But the interesting thing was that this parallel story that happened when the Death Star was first destroyed was it showed all the other players that were involved, all the other pilots and all the other little things that had to happen just right in order for the good to prevail over evil. That's us in our own little way. you share an article, you donate, you volunteer, you run for office, you help support someone who's running for office, you get someone registered to vote. There are so many of these side stories that we need to be the hero of that will help our side prevail. There's not one key thing that you can do. There are so many things that you can do.
And I have to say that you're right on the money, Mitch, with that. Is people out there who can hear our voices, people who will hear our voices. You have to support conservative organizations like ours, the Jewish Republican Alliance, and our newly formed JRA Nation that's going to get involved with 2022 and making sure that helping to win the midterms back. But you have to make sure that these organizations are strong, that they have funding to do the things that they want to do. So many of them have been shut down. Walkaway movement was shut down, lost their email, lost their Facebook page. Brandon called me and he was upset about that. So it's really, you got to support the organizations that are out there fighting. The American Freedom Alliance is another one. Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point.
Yeah, there's a comment on your point, Bruce, from Richard H. How can we support or sponsor local small businesses and events and luncheons? I live in Thousand Oaks, and I will tell you there are 3 or 4 restaurants in this area that are open for business. One of them, owned by a Jewish Republican, actually has a big banner. You can see it from the freeway. It says open for dining, indoor dining. Okay, so I told my wife, Stephanie, we have to support these organizations. They are being fined daily. They're risking their business, and they are saying, the heck with it. I am free to run my business. I am free to support my family. We have to support. When Bruce commented, I got a haircut. That's right. I got a haircut because I found a local conservative that is cutting hair in her home. So you know what? Not only am I going to go to her, but I'm going to give her one big tip, because these are people that are defying this craziness of you're essential, you're not essential, you can't work, you can't support your family. As Dennis Prager says, if you can't fight, you have to at least support the fighters, now more than ever.
So you're part of the hairdresser underground now, Mitch?
It's a speakeasy.
Well, one of the things before we leave, there's a group I want to thank as well that saved our behinds last night. Mitch and I live about a mile from each other, and about a mile from us, at about 5 something last night, a sudden fire broke out about a mile or so from our homes. And we were thinking, oh my God, this is 2018 all over again. Are we going to have to evacuate? And the fire department, the local fire department, all the surrounding ones, they just ganged up on this fire that went from 50 acres to 250 acres within an hour. And by midnight or by late evening, they had stopped this thing. So kudos to our local fire department who saved us once again.
Yes. Well, Bruce, I'm so glad we got together. Like I said, this is like our AA. We need each other. We have to support each other. We have to know we're not sane. Or I'm sorry, we're not insane, that we are thinking clearly sometimes. And for all of you viewing today, you're part of the resistance. We are truly part of the resistance now. We're in uncharted territory, but we will prevail only if we all do our part.
And there will be a time, and I look forward to that day, when we're all able to be together again in person at an event, at a big event that we'll put on at a conference. It will happen. We look forward to that day, our monthly meetings. We're very excited about all that. But until that day, we're going to continue to speak out the way we can and connect with as many of you as we can through Zoom and through our shows and through our emails. If we may get shut down for social media, I hope we're not, but we have your emails. And if we have to correspond that way, we will. The way you can see all these past shows for now is go on our YouTube channel, Jewish Republican Alliance, and you're able to see all of our past shows that we've done since the inception of this lockdown. How do you make a donation? You go on our website, jewishrepublicanalliance.org. We would appreciate that to help us be strong for 2021. Until that time, we are so thankful and grateful that you were all here today Now more than ever, we have to stick together. Our voices must be heard. So don't be silent. So until we meet again, Shabbat Shalom. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.